Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry to interrupt your lunch. Welcome to Las Vegas and to this Social Justice and Leadership Conference. My thanks to everyone involved in organizing this weekend, especially Scott Miller for the invitation to be here, which gave me the opportunity to think about the before now and the now. It's always an honor and privilege to be asked to say a few words anywhere. That is especially true when the forum is one provided by the NEA. I can't express how much the NEA and this caucus mean to me, how instrumental both were in educating me and aiding me in the 1990s, including with legal representation, and how affectionately the NEA and the caucus stood by me when I was at first a new and deeply closeted social studies teacher and then an out teacher at a high school in suburban St. Louis. I'll never forget the drama-filled representative assemblies of the mid-1990s and how the then-called Gay and Lesbian Caucus worked without rest to pass new business items that would advance the NEA's support for LGBTQ students and teachers. I'll always remember the NEA workshops in D.C. that inspired and empowered me to be open and honest with my colleagues and my students back home. Thank you to the NEA, thank you to the caucus, thank you to 1990s leadership, Carol Watchler and Jim Testerman and others, and thank you to everyone here this weekend who is still doing the hard work of protecting, nurturing, and supporting our young people so they have every opportunity in a safe environment to be well educated and empowered to speak fearlessly and wisely in the public square. I wish, desperately so, that I could stand here today reporting that everything is fixed now. Everything is settled, made right. Our worries are few and far between. Unfortunately, as you know too well, I stand here, now in my late 50s, with feelings reminiscent of those of my late 20s, because powerful forces have again organized to dematerialize LGBTQ teachers, students, and lesson plans. I had a naive idea back then, in the 1990s. I believed that by this stage of my life, human rights, personal dignity, and the perennial pursuit of happiness would be mighty pillars, tall and strong, upon which all social and legal infrastructure rest, and that the battles of the second half of the 20th century for LGBTQ inclusion and equity would have won the day. I hoped in the 1990s, when I was active in my local, state, and the national NEA, that by the 2020s, the time allotted to discuss who has the right to seek happiness would have mercifully expired. I hoped 30 years ago that questions about fundamental human liberty for everyone would not be matters of review by legislative bodies in the spring of 2023, and that everyone in every school building would be free and safe to learn just as they are. 15 years ago, it seemed that things were going relatively well. It seemed to me that many conversations were drawing to a close and many previously controversial matters were settling in the minds of a healthy majority of the citizenry. Some legislatures had acted. Courts had ruled. Don't ask, don't tell was gone. DOMA was nullified. Marriage equality had won. Things were not utopian, not by any stretch, and some within our community had not yet been heard, had not yet been warmly welcomed at the table. But in many ways, we were moving forward. The trajectory seemed set. and the future was certainly brighter than the past. Then came the early shrieks of backlash. First to the election of an African American president in 2008, then to his healthcare reform, the most truly pro-life legislation since Medicaid and Medicare in 1965, then to the possibility of a woman president in 2016. And these days, to the rightful and reasonable assertion of individual rights and personal autonomy by transgender and non-binary Americans. Come to find out, there were a lot of ugly prejudices swimming beneath the surface, and all of them were given permission to walk on dry land, proudly public, after election night 2016. The backlash is fierce, mean, and dangerous. It's hard this spring not to drown in the tidal wave of theo-authoritarian legislation. These forces, if we allow, will go as far as they can, taking away one right after another from one group and the next. The hundreds of pieces of legislation across our 50 states are a blatant denial of individual sovereignty, personal liberty, the right to seek who one is, and the right to be who one is. As with all authoritarian turns, suspicion of educators race to the top of conservative minds. What are they teaching our children? What damage are the, quote, liberal elite doing to our students in their, quote, government schools? Two primary targets have emerged: CRT and LGBTQ, particularly in regard to education about and acceptance of transgender and non-binary students in the fullness of their persons and pronouns. Of course, these forces once held all the power. As reactionaries, they want it all back. They are particularly offended by those who won't conform to their gender dictates, and by those of color who don't back down to their ill-attained power. And they want all students and teachers to be silent about our identities, the way it used to be in the good old days. An example from our recent good old days: there were a dozen LGBTQ teachers at the Missouri high school at which I was hired in 1990. Those who at that time were my age now had been silent for decades. The Miami-Dade vote, the Briggs Initiative, the assassination of Harvey Milk. These traumas were too recent. The pain was too close, and the fear was too real. Silence was the norm. Teachers especially went to extraordinary means to conceal their private lives from colleagues and from students. I was the youngest one among those dozen LGBTQ teachers at that high school when, in 1994, I had to speak. Workplace silence no longer worked for 29-year-old me. Our history, of course, has been silence too, without our consent, before we were at the table to speak up, in our schools especially. To speak of Stonewall, or to fully explore the lives of civil rights genius Bayard Rustin or brave astronaut Sally Ride was not allowed in our classrooms, nor were LGBTQ milestones included in our textbooks. These things still are hard to find, especially now, and especially in red zone school districts. LGBTQ plus History Month was founded in 1994 to give a confident voice to these stories, these people, and the beautiful complexity and totality of their lives. The NEA is very much part of that story too, especially after the Representative Assembly in 1995 passed a new business item explicitly recognizing LGBTQ+ History Month. This helped establish the event's legitimacy and appropriateness. It also caused a firestorm in 1995 and 1996. Notice the language here from CWA President Beverly LaHaye. Innocence, purity, children, destroyed. The attacks against the NEA continued for months after the 1995 RA, even including attacks against the NEA by name, against History Month by name, and against me by name on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. Notice again the language here. Unnatural lifestyle. As this headline portends, at the 1996 RA, the 1995 language explicitly endorsing LGBTQ History Month was eliminated from NEA resolutions. So too was name-specific language about the other history months. That endorsement of History Month by the 1995 NEA RA, even living only explicitly for 1 year, nearly 3 decades later, is still referenced as a powerful moment for a nascent celebration. These mid-1990s controversies between the NEA and progressive Americans and conservative and reactionary groups is much like the one today, in tactics and in language, except that the primary target in the 2020s are transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary students and teachers, with lesbians and gays getting a bit of a pass. Book hysteria, like now, existed then too. In 1995, for example, the St. Louis chapter of GLSEN, the first chapter outside Massachusetts, purchased copies of Kevin Jennings' 1994 book, Becoming Visible, a reader in gay and lesbian history for high school and college students, and sent one to all 85 high schools in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. Kevin, the author, co-founded GLSEN in 1990. He also said yes in 1994 when I asked him to be on a national organizing committee for the first LGBTQ History Month that October. This book of his, a beautiful contribution to placement of LGBTQ history in secondary schools and colleges, was not allowed in these St. Louis libraries. Even at my own high school, it was kept in reserve, accessible only by going through the librarian. Today, in Missouri, with a General Assembly that is about 71% Republican, Missouri's public libraries are being threatened with defunding because a few uppity librarians, they're the best, and the ACLU challenged in court a ban on LGBTQ-themed books. This October is the 30th annual LGBTQ+ History Month, and we need it as much as we ever did. A History Month, precisely as Dr. Carter Woodson planned it in 1926, when he founded what is now Black History Month, hands a megaphone to these precious stories. Knowing our history makes us better, wiser, and more secure in our own beings. History gives young people a narrative in which they themselves can walk, a story in which they themselves can write their own chapters. It gives them a foundation, a boost, and a shoulder from which to see their lives as part of an endless stream of struggling humanity, to quote the poem, yearning to breathe free. History Month is now celebrated in 19 locations around the world, with 4 added in 2022: Italy, Cuba, France, and Uganda. And we now have an international committee on LGBTQ plus history months that meets quarterly, bringing together archivists and teachers and activists all over the world who believe that recovering, preserving, and publicizing history is important work in all human rights movements, including our own. History Month is a vocal insistence that we won't be silent again. History Month is the opposite of silence. It's a firm assertion that every human being has a right to their history, to their stories, and to their people. Don't say gay bills, do the opposite. They mandate silence. As we meet this weekend, we're in a season of craven politicians one-upping each other, calling on fear to drum up votes, to secure power, and to impose their doctrines on our civic and private lives. Voices are already being silenced. School teachers are scared. The chilling effect is stalling our efforts, and in some areas, reversing them. And many still risk much if they don't bear false witness against themselves. That's why what we do in education matters so much. Reading, writing, arithmetic, science, literature, the arts, music, history. These things matter. These things enrich us. These things give us wings to fly, and when necessary, wings to coast along until turbulent times pass. Every hindrance that denies these possibilities to our young people, every action that causes young people to stumble, every prejudice that makes it less likely that students will reach their potential must be overcome. We are here this weekend to learn how to better stand up for all students, lesbian, gay, straight, ace, bi, rich, poor, black, brown, white, cisgender, non-binary, transgender, native-born and immigrants, those who speak the majority language and those who don't, the religious and the agnostic. All of us. Our work is about creating a safe place to learn the academic skills that modernity and the good life demand of us, while preparing young people to be brave, bold citizens. Our purpose is simple: to be the best educators we can be and to take good care of all our students. This conference particularly focuses on the LGBTQ plus experience, student, and teacher. We have come a long way since the 1990s, but we have a long way yet to go. We must remain vigilant, observant, and fortified against those who would crush us and our students. All over the world, where things are better and worse, we have work to do. Celebrating the differences and recognizing the similarities is part of that work. Educating everyone to their fullest potential and uniting the human family in every way we can is also part of that work. This is our obligation as teachers, counselors, and administrators. This is what all students everywhere, without exception, deserve. And this is precisely why we are here this weekend. Thank you.